Today is October 13th,
That's right.
2009. My name is actually Julian Reitman, and it's my pleasure to interview today Harriet and Ralph Lotstein. And in Ralph's Gloria's home, as part of the oral history archive of the Jewish Historical Society of Lower Fairfield County. A reasonable place to start is to talk about your parents, where they came from, how they got to Stamford, things like that, sort of give us a sort of a foundation on which to start this talk.
Mm-hmm.
Which of you wants to start?
Well, but you're out, if you have it.
The only thing that I was going to say is that my mother was born in Russia, and my father was born in Romania. And they both came to Stamford, not together, but they met here, I guess through relatives.
Harriet was. My father was born in Romania, and at the age of 13, he came from a wealthy background, and he wanted to be his own person, and his father didn't want that. He was strict with him. So my father left Romania at the age of 13. And he made his way to America. It took him 1 year. And from what he told, I'm only telling you what he told me. He worked in the coal mines. And he said, once you started to work in the coal mines, you could not escape. You had to stay there and go by their rules. So his mind always worked, and he decided that that was not for him. So he hid under the wheels of a hearse, and he got out of there. And from there, he traveled to the United States. How he never made that clear from that point.
Didn't he go to England first?
He did.
I thought that's...
He could have, Ralph.
Yeah.
He could have. But that's what he told us. And he went to work. He had an uncle, Mr. Silverman, who had a Silverman and Shannon junkyard on the corner of Hawthorne Street.
Okay.
Which is not here anymore.
Right. Yep.
And his uncle was a wealthy man who lived on Hillcrest Avenue,
Okay.
but they never invited him to stay in their house. He stayed in the junkyard. He worked there and he slept there.
Well, that was not that unusual then.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah, you don't remember what year, anything, the years or...
No, I don't.
No.
I
But that's how he came to Stamford.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, these are the things that he told me, and I remember them.
Right.
And from that point, my mother lived up the street, and he met her. And I believe that they were either 19 or 20 years old and went together and got married. And Ralph, if you want to, I don't want to take...
No, that's all right. You're doing great. I'm
But
learning
the question was there a gathering for the wedding ceremony, or was it small, or they never said?
They never said that.
was her sister here when she got here? Was Mom's sister, was she?
My mother came from Russia, and from what she told us, she came with her mother and her father, and her 2 brothers and her sister.
Okay.
Jenny.
It was Isadora Schacht, Sam Schacht, and her sister was Jenny Schacht. And they all led very interesting lives. But Ralph, really, I don't want to take
No,
over the whole thing.
You're doing fine.
Yeah.
Jenny became Jenny Plotkin,
Yeah,
married to Morris Plotkin.
yeah.
And they lived on Emmett Street in Stamford. And my mother and father and her two brothers lived in a house on Lower Lafayette Street.
Okay.
3-family.
Three families.
And it had a big yard with barns in the yard, and my grandfather had a horse and buggy.
So there were barns behind the,
Yeah.
Behind the house.
Lower
on-
Prospect?
This was 22 Lafayette, the
Oh,
south
Lafayette.
side of Route 1,
Right.
Main Street.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
and
somehow it's hard to think that there were barns back then.
my grandparents lived on the 3rd floor. We we lived on the 2nd, and my aunt and uncle lived on the 1st.
Okay. All right, so, when did you start school? Which school did you start?
I went to Rogers School.
Yeah, I did too. There's a picture of my mother and father, Laura, next to my bed. Gloria?
I gave it to him.
Oh, you did?
It's right here, honey.
Yeah.
Oh,
And in terms of Rogers School, did it leave any memories for you, or was it just going to
Yeah.
school?
Well, it did for me. First of all, I was, well, because I was Jewish,
Right,
I was called names,
okay.
and I was actually a good student, but not a good athlete. So they would fight who would not take me on their team. And they gave out seals, you know, a gold seal, and the last seal was a red one, and I would always get the red seal.
Now, there were girls' teams?
That's what I'm talking about, a girls' team.
Oh,
Yeah, they didn't mix too much in those years.
Yes.
When you got
no,
to.
I knew
I
that,
lived-
but I didn't think that they actually had athletics for girls.
Oh,
then.
yes.
They did. Oh, interesting.
Rogers School had 2 schools, and the one I went to was on William Street.
And this was girls and boys both went to school?
Yes, yes,
yeah, there was an old building
yeah,
and a newer building.
yes.
And were you an athlete?
No, I wasn't. In Rogers School, I didn't participate in any type of sports.
You were
Just went to school. We walked from Lafayette Street. We went home for lunch.
Yeah,
He was a drummer. He was
There
a
were no
musician.
buses.
yeah. And our parents didn't drive us.
My mom drove a little bit. She drove us a little.
Yeah.
Well, were you exposed to anti-Semitic comments also?
Nothing that I can recall that was that. I enjoyed being there. I had some nice teachers. And from Rogers, we went to Burdick Junior High School.
See, he did. I went to Rogers. I went from Rogers, I went to Stanford High School.
Well, they didn't have Burdick then.
Uh,
But did you?
Yeah, I am 9 years older than Ralph. I'm 91 years old.
You're doing very well.
she does.
Yeah.
She does very well.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
And when,
So you went straight to Stanford High.
but before that, when did your father start the business?
Oh, my father was very interested. My father, after a while, after his working in the junkyard, decided, and he met my mother, and at a very young age, and they had told there were 7 children, and my father knew, you know, he was very capable, and he knew how to make a living, and he would do anything to make money. He would, if there was apples, he would gather up apples and he would sell them. And he also would go from people's homes to homes and like clean out their basements and take out worthwhile things and sell them.
And then,
From then on, he decided he had enough of that. he decided he wanted to go in the meat business.
Okay, right,
And that's when it becomes very interesting.
yes,
He started by going, there was a poultry market, meat market and poultry market on Civic Street,
yes,
Greenstein's. And
Kosher market.
he rented the ice box there.
okay.
And he bought and he sold from the ice box.
And they also had a slaughterhouse off of West Hill Road
Right,
where they slaughtered some calves. And they also slaughtered in back of the meat market on Pacific Street, Greenstein's.
they actually slaughtered them there?
Yeah, they did some slaughtering behind the market.
The rabbi would come there and,
I guess so.
Yeah.
It was a little before my time.
Yeah. But then my father was a kind of man, I mean, he had a wonderful mind because everybody was amazed at what he can think of. But he didn't like to go in business by himself. So he was told about this young man, Ralph Sosnowitz. And Ralph was at loose ends, and he convinced him to go in business with him. And that's how they started Sosnowitz and Lotstein on Canal Street, 290 Canal Street.
so that was the first name,
This being recorded.
yes.
He built a building together with Walters.
Yeah.
What was his name?
Isidore Walters.
Yeah, he was in the produce business. They occupied the same building. Well, they were separated, but
Okay,
and he handled and we handled kosher meats,
right.
and that was the main part of the business.
And the meat was primarily slaughtered locally?
It was slaughtered locally, right, in this area, right.
Did they handle poultry also?
What?
Poultry,
Chickens?
No,
turkey.
they handled some, I guess, that were slaughtered by others, ice packed things. In those days, there were no refrigerated
Right.
trucks.
Yep.
I remember loading the open truck and they covered everything with a canvas.
Yeah.
Yep, yep,
It was downtown and in Stamford on Canal Street where you had other meat houses, Wilson and Company, Armour,
right,
and Swift.
And Goldberg.
Oh yeah, the Goldbergs.
Stanford dressed beef
yeah.
was across the street.
Okay, so how did the business grow?
Well,
After my father died, my brothers took it over, Lewis and Irving, and they bought out Mr. Sosnowitz.
I see.
And from there they grew. They had a little slaughterhouse in Norwalk on the post road where they slaughtered pigs. And then they bought a plant in Hartford on Pleasant Street where they slaughtered cows and pigs and they manufactured table-ready meats
Right.
under the name of Capital Farms brand.
Oh, okay.
And they expanded the business where we also had a slaughterhouse in Hawarden, Iowa. We had a beef packing plant in Sioux City. And we had 3 farms where we raised our own cattle for slaughter. We fed cattle for slaughter.
But I'd like to
So,
backtrack. Before my father died, my brothers worked with my father, and I also worked there.
You know,
Now you had a national cash register machine?
No, we had, all my brothers worked there with my father, and my oldest brother,
Lewis.
Lewis, was, well, he and my father were inseparable. Is that true?
Yes,
They had a
absolutely.
special relationship. In fact, he had it with all his sons. He would have lunch with them, and a very good relationship. And then when I think I was graduated high school. I started, I went to NYU downtown, Secretary, and when I got through, my oldest brother suggested that I work with the head bookkeeper, Miss Edward Ryan. And that was, we had 2 floors. The main floor where the business was done, but the second floor with a potbelly stove was where the bookkeeping was done. And the head bookkeeper was Ed Ryan and me. And I worked there until I got married.
They sent Harriet on a lot of missions. I mean, in those days, there was no Mary Parkway. She had to go into the Bronx or someplace else with a station wagon to pick things up or to
Yeah.
drop things off.
In fact, I only drove a week, and my brother sent me down to 44th Street to pick up a band from J.J. Harrington. And when I brought him to the plant, I said to him, now I'm going to tell you, I've only been driving 1 week. And he said, I'm going to tell, I mean, everything went well, but I felt that I had to tell him. So,
A question I'm curious about, were there any meat inspectors or anything like that
oh
in
yeah,
those days?
Ralph, you can talk about
Yeah,
that.
it was the local health department at that time when we were in the state had inspectors. But when we became a larger slaughterer, there was the federal government, and we had to have an establishment number,
And Ralph,
and we had an inspector in the plant
what
all
about the
the time.
Rabbi Rosenberg?
Rabbi Rosenberg from Yonkers was
Yeah.
our rabbi, our main rabbi. And I used to travel with him. If meat coming in was delayed, we'd have to go and wash it because it couldn't go longer than 36 hours before it had to be washed in order to keep the blood from drying.
And we had a very nice relationship with him. In fact, he married me.
He was at our wedding too,
Yeah, and he was
Gloria and I with
very kosher, but he ate in our house, my mother's house. Yeah.
But he didn't eat on the road.
No.
If I went with him, he'd buy a box of cornflakes and eat it out of the box. You know, pour milk into it, because he wouldn't trust the food in a diner.
And he wouldn't touch your hair.
Right, yeah.
You have a handkerchief, he held one hand, one end, and you held the other hand.
Well, that was,
The custom,
that was the custom,
Yeah.
and the ultra-Orthodox keep it that way.
that's right,
We were all born in Stanford, the whole family,
yes, at home.
most at home, either down to Lower Lafayette or Upper Lafayette. When my father built the second house, he borrowed the plans from a police detective on the Stanford Police Department to build that house on Lafayette Street.
Captain Ryan.
And
Yeah.
then you went into, after your dad passed away, no, before your dad passed away, you went into the market.
Well,
So,
when
yeah,
my brother Sal graduated college, Cornell, my father set him up in business by buying him a food market. It was on Atlantic Street. It was owned by a old-time
E.B. Hoyt.
family in Stanford by the name of E.B. Hoyt.
Right.
And that's where he started his Grand Central.
Okay, so he changed the name, or Hoyt had that name?
I think that Sal had that name. It was about the time that Grand Central Station started. I think they took the name from that.
Uh-huh.
And they moved up to Atlantic Street
And
near the
then,
Palace Theater.
yeah, and then we had another one near the Stanford Theater.
Right.
Coffee house.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was across the street from the Stanford Theater. We had a second market.
And
That's where Ralph
besides
worked for a
being
while.
in the meat business, they were also in real estate.
Oh, okay.
Development.
Known as the
Only
Stanford,
in Stamford or in
no.
Connecticut?
Stanford,
Never-
Greenwich, Bedford, Bridgeport,
the road.
the Roten.
You know where Papa Joe's is?
Yeah.
That building. And he owned that with the,
The Sosowitz family.
yeah.
Okay. So were there other families that, besides the Sosnowitzes, that, were involved?
No,
That was about it, I think.
from then on, it was all Lotsteins.
Yeah,
Whatever they did,
Oh,
it
yeah.
was all the brothers.
All the brothers.
Yeah.
they
were very
named the
close.
real estate company after my father. It was the Samuel Lotstein Realty Company. And we had two other real estate companies, the Avon Investment Company and the Capital Company. And then we bought some properties from B.T. Harris.
Okay.
And yeah, the building on the corner of Main and Washington Boulevard, we call that the Ripplewam Company,
And Ralph was the president at one time.
after my brother Louis died.
And the family was a very fair family. Whatever they did was equal among all the
That's right.
brothers.
That's right. My
When
brothers,
when did you set up Hartford Provisioning Company?
well, we started, that came from the plant that we bought in Hartford. It was a meat packing plant on Pleasant Street.
Wasn't that New Britain?
There was some-
And yes, and then we bought a plant in New Britain, Connecticut. It was a Cremo Brewery before we moved into it. And there we manufactured a lot of table-ready meats. Hot dogs, bolognas, and
Did you bring a lot of things in from the east side or of New York, or not really?
not too much. We had, we did some slaughtering in,
The Bronx.
in New Jersey,
Also in the Bronx.
maybe in the Bronx too. We did, there were some slaughterhouses downtown Manhattan.
Yes, on
And
the
we
west
had,
side.
we had a facility in the Bronx.
Yeah, because I'd go down there.
We called it the Capitol Farms Company. And during the time when, I guess when the war was on, the Second World War, there was a shortage of meats, and we had a store in the Bronx. We had a store in Bridgeport.
And what about the Grand Central on Main Street in Stamford?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well,
During the war.
that was originally my brother Saul, but he decided to make it all
That's right.
part of the family.
So they were all
Now, what percentage of the meat business was kosher and what was not kosher?
Well, everything, we handled full animals.
Right.
The front part of it
Right.
was kosher. The hindquarters went to the Trafa stores.
Okay, so within your facility, it was all kosher meat.
Yeah,
Okay. Things have changed since Stanford.
Yeah.
a lot has changed since then.
Yes. Well, originally, how many supermarkets did
We
we have?
we had 15 stores at one time,
Supermarkets.
but they were all smaller stores, not in competition with the big stops and shops that were coming into the area.
Right here in Stanford.
We still
had-
own most of the real estate.
Right here in Stanford, we had one at High Ridge Road, and one at Ridgeway,
That's right.
and one on Forest Street.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in the one on Forest Street when the blackout happened in, was it 65 or 66? 66. And the lights went out and I'm in there shopping and somebody came over and figured out how to do the bill on the paper bag, so I felt at home.
That's
I
how
ended
they
up on a
used to
bag.
do it.
Paper bag that said Green
That's how they
Central.
used to do
That's
it.
the way they did in, years ago.
Right.
They figured out your bill on the bag.
Before we were
Right.
married, my mother would send me to Grand Central. I was 13 years old with a slip of what I should buy. but there were certain things you couldn't buy because it was during the war. If you bought meat, you got butter. If you didn't buy the meat, you didn't get the butter.
Or sugar, or,
Right.
Mr. Bernard,
They used to stand outside the store
Right.
and wait
that's right.
during the rationing.
Yeah.
it's like the years of the gasoline shortage.
Right, yeah, well, then, that gets us into World War II. What other aspects of being at home during the war did you feel, besides the rationing and so on? For example, no gasoline.
We really didn't have a problem because we had our own market.
Okay,
But there was rationing. Gasoline was, you had to have a coupon.
Yes,
I had a 1941 Ford, and I could even run that on kerosene.
and I think,
okay.
was it Saul had a Model T Ford
Yeah, you had a,
to go to high school.
Then Ralph went into the service when he was 17.
I was in the Navy, and Jack was in the Army.
And my brother Jack.
Did you enlist in the Navy?
I enlisted in the Navy right out of high school. But I traveled around the world, wound up in China. But Jack saw some action in
He was
the,
quartermaster, and he saw the war from Paris in one of the balconies.
What did you do in the Navy?
what did I do? I was an electrician's mate.
Okay. And on what sort of ship?
I was on an LCI,
Okay.
a landing craft.
Yeah, not a friendly place.
No, we were the lead of a 15-boat group, and I was in for a couple of years.
Stanford was a very small town. I don't know if other people
You should
have
sit
told
here,
you.
Laura. As long as you're gonna do talking.
Right.
We had a central sort of a town where you could just walk from one end to the other.
Right.
And it was just wonderful.
You realize that Bull's Head was the end of the town.
That's right.
It's very hard to
I've
think
known
of that.
Gloria since she's 13 years old.
Excuse me.
She was my babysitter.
Okay.
We're an old Stanford family. We were all born here, as I said, and most people know us. They knew us from the name of Grand Central.
Right.
And we were all born at home.
Did Dr. Lemoyne deliver any of you?
Anybody?
Dr. Dichter.
Dr. Dichter.
Dr.
Dr.
Dichter
Dichter.
and Dr. Nemoyton.
Right.
And Dr. Nemoyton, what, if you could find him, because Dr. Nemoyton came with a horse and buggy, and he was a painter, amateur painter. And if he saw a beautiful scene, he would start the buggy and forget about his painting and do the painting, and either somebody would come running after him and bring him, or he'd finally find his way.
Gee, Ron Marcus never told us that story.
But that's true.
Well, the story we heard was that before he had the horse and buggy, he came on a bicycle.
Well, that I don't know.
And,
But I
and
know
he
that-
would, nobody had phones, if he went to Pacific Street, people would call him, there's a sick child up in this building. By the time he finished, he forgot where his bicycle was. So they had to go help him find it.
But he had the horse and buggy
Yeah.
when I knew.
In those days, the doctors came to the house.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Dr.
And
Yeah.
every one
Dr.
of us,
Dichter,
yeah, was our
he
Dick.
came with his son,
Yeah.
Irving.
Yeah,
Sometimes,
We can't recall how different life was.
And
Much
it
more
was,
Stanford was a small town.
Yeah.
Now, in dealing with the kosher meat and so on, you were dealing mostly with the Jewish population.
Kosher markets, we went into Westchester,
But did the Grand Central Markets also have an appeal to other people?
Grand Central, the only Grand Central that had kosher meat was the Ridgeway store.
Okay.
The
That's
other
what I
store-
remember.
It was
So,
dealt with.
thanks for telling me my brain works. Okay.
Anne is my companion, and she lived on Forest Street, and her family dealt with the Grand Central Market.
That's where we did all our shopping.
Yeah,
Food market.
yeah. Yeah, the one at Ridgeway, I knew my way around, but the one on Forest, I only go occasionally.
The one on Ridgeway before we took it over was a First National.
Okay, yes. Yeah, when you think of the whole supermarket business, it's changed so radically in Stamford.
It has,
I mean, A&P used to be the big chain.
absolutely.
And
At the
so,
corner of Lafayette Street, we had a small A&P, and we had a Butler store.
James Butler.
that one I
It was
don't
on
know.
Lafayette, it was on Main Street,
On Main Street.
yeah. And then we had Ralph's
That's
corner.
confectionery store,
Get a shot
and
of
Mr.
Bruce.
Goshberg's tailor store.
Yes,
Mr. Goshberg, his daughters, two
Raising-
daughters, and Larry, their
You
son.
know that.
Yeah,
the lawyer, that was his
Brenda.
father.
yeah, Brenda
Yeah,
Yeah,
And Gladys.
and Gladys. Yeah.
and then there was the car place. That was, what
G&B.
was his name?
Jingles and Bernstein.
Bernstein.
Yeah.
Joe Bernstein. He smoked cigarettes. He was always full of ashes all over his jacket.
Okay, so this was pretty far on East Main. So you would walk to Prospect Street or,
Oh, that's,
walked
yeah,
all
we did a lot of walking.
we did a,
We walked to the shul on,
Grove Street.
on
Grove
Grove Street?
Street.
Yeah.
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 We walked to the Jewish Center.
walked everywhere.
Yeah,
My mother walked from Lafayette Street to Grove Street every Saturday.
You have to go to the synagogue.
oh, your mother did go every Saturday?
Every Saturday.
yeah.
Very-
We had to get up and go to the synagogue, just like we had to get up to go to school. I mean, she pushed us to go to the synagogue on Saturday.
And my oldest brother was a president for 10 years at the
The
synagogue.
longest reigning president, Louis
Yeah,
Lotstein.
no term limits.
I have to tell you a very interesting, funny story. My mother went every Saturday, and Rabbi Ehrenkrantz was the rabbi at the time, and she said to him, my mother wasn't afraid to raise her voice, and she said, "Rabbi, it's very cold in here." So he said, "Well, why don't you tell your son?" She said, "Oh, he's too busy." So,
It was wonderful.
Yeah,
It was a wonderful community.
yeah, it was very different. And of course, the children just spread. I mean, that's the thing.
Well, the east side, Lafayette, Quintard Terrace, around there, mostly Jewish people.
Right.
The
Yeah.
west side was mostly Italian people, and that's how it was separate. But the schools, there was never any trouble in school. Nobody against each other or racism, never. Everybody got along very well.
It's true.
we moved from 22 Lafayette Street to 81 Lafayette Street.
In all the years we dealt with the same people like Dr. Dichter and
Yeah,
the Wofsey's law firm.
Dr. Rosenblum,
Right.
Dave Weinstock was our accountant.
yeah.
So it was, as you point out, a tight community.
Yes,
Very, very
Very
tight
nice.
community.
people on
And
our,
this up here was the country.
Right, yeah.
When I was in the summers and I delivered for the Grand Central, I delivered up here on Westover Road to go all the way out to where the Alshels lived
You
to
know,
deliver food.
And it was,
Now, who was living up here? I mean,
Was-
this was just,
There were
was nothing.
estates, there were estates up here, several
All-
estates
all
with
open
very
land.
high hedges, you couldn't even see the houses.
Benny Nallison developed this street. We were the first house here on the street.
and when was that?
52 years ago.
He wanted to call it Ben's Lane. And I said, Ben, you have such a beautiful name. Now, why don't you call it Nallison Lane? So he changed it to Westover Lane.
and even where I lived was an estate, Holbrook Estates. When I
Yeah.
moved in, we had dirt roads and with ruts, you know.
What year was that?
I lived there, I've been there over 50 years. Same house,
Same house.
We all,
1952.
as we got married, we all lived with my mother-in-law and father-in-law for a while. And from there, we moved downstairs to an apartment, Harriet, and when she moved out, we moved downstairs. And then from there, we built this house.
The family kept very close contact because of my mother and father. My mother made Friday night dinner for everybody, and everybody always came. They never had an excuse that they had to go someplace else. We always had a big crowd every Friday night, and my mother made whatever you liked. If you liked meatloaf, you got meatloaf. If you liked chicken, you got chicken. She baked her own bread,
And Holly every
Yeah.
week.
Five
kept a
loaves
kosher house.
And then she
Uh,
was, and then what she belonged to the Hebrew Ladies Educational League. And to raise money for them, she would bake hulls, you know, the red traditional hull. And she sold to doctors
The
and lawyers.
dentist.
and
Dr.
they all-
Sherman,
And they all came and picked up their hull.
Dr. Sherman, Dr. Rosenblum.
And then with my mother, she went to Dr. Sherman. And this
Saul Sherman.
you give you a laugh. And she would charge $5 for her loaf of bread. But Dr. Sherman would send his bills out, and one bill that came to her house was he had raised his price. So she called him and she said, you know, Dr. Sherman, she always called him Dr. Sherman, since you raised your price, I'm raising mine. And the hulls from now on will be $10.
Yeah, she was.
Gloria had an experience with my mother, taking her to
I
the
was taking her
Jewish Center
to the
one
Jewish
day.
Center to a meeting, and as I came up Grove Street, I made a left-hand turn to come around in front of the center, but you weren't allowed to do that. But I didn't see anyone around, I did it very slowly.
From Prospect
Just,
Street.
yeah, but as I pulled up in front of the Jewish Center, I looked in the mirror, and there was a police car in back of me. Oh, God, and so he came over to me and he said, young lady, do you know what you did? And I said, I'm sorry, officer, but I'm taking my mother-in-law, she had to get to the meeting. Well, with that, my mother-in-law leaned over and she said, officer, this is the best daughter-in-law you could ever have. I'll never forget that. She did it for me, officer. And so he looked at both of us and he said, well, I'll let you go. He said, but next time, if you do, you might not get it to the meeting. But the way she leaned over and she said, officer, this is the best daughter-in-law you could have. But
Given all the beef and so on, was steak served a lot or not?
in those years,
You what?
the steak served a lot in those years.
Yeah, meat was an
Meat
important
was- yeah.
thing, a big part of your meal. My father came home for lunch most of the time, and my mother had a big lunch for him, and then most of the time it included meat.
Right, but it just seems that steak is a more recent,
Now, I don't think we, you know, the
Briskets.
traditional thing for Jewish people is brisket. My
Right.
mother never made that.
she never made brisket.
No,
No.
That's
she never
interesting.
made steak.
No, she didn't.
No.
But did she ever
Chopped
make
meat, a
brisket?
lot of meatballs.
No.
I don't know.
Meatballs,
Right.
chicken.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, chicken and
She
meat
was a
there.
wonderful cook with vegetables.
yeah, that's one thing we had a lot of.
Yeah, but she did it different ways. You know, she didn't have any formal
Right,
education. No.
But that was the, sort of the Russian tradition.
That's, I
of,
guess so. And we had our main meal at noontime. And whatever my father ate, that's what I ate.
Well,
Sometimes the boys would come home to lunch too, to my mother's house.
But if it was Passover, I used to bring them their food to the office, because my brothers did not eat bread during Passover. So we'd fill a milk bottle with coffee, and my oldest brother did not eat matzah. He only liked sponge cake. So that was my job, is to make the sponge cake and make the delivery. And
did you bring the honey with it?
no, they didn't care for that. They had the matzah sandwich and whatever.
You didn't have the variety of food that you have today
No.
on Passover.
No,
A different world.
Yeah,
Well, Gloria, you want to fill us a little bit of how you got inveigled into this team?
Well, we moved here from the Bronx. I was about 12 years old. My father had secured a position here. He was manager of the White Mountain Laundry, a commercial laundry. And we lived here for about a year and a half in an apartment. My mother was looking for a two-family house. And one day, my friend came running to my mother and she said, "Mrs. Newman, hurry up. There's an apartment for rent on Lafayette Street." And she whispered in my ear, "And Gloria, there's two boys living in that house." I'll never forget that. Well, anyway, my mother did secure the apartment, and that's how I met the Lotsteins. They were upstairs and we were downstairs. And it was almost like one family. We were very close,
but you were my
and I
babysitter.
was her babysitter. And then when I graduated high school, we moved to California. So I was away from Stanford for about 2.5 years. I came back, I was almost 20 on a vacation. And Ralph and his brother insisted I come to their house for the weekend. I was in New York, so that I could see all my old friends. And I never went home. I came on a weekend, a Friday or Saturday, and on Tuesday Ralph proposed to me. And that's the story of my life. It's almost 60 years. We have
So you didn't like California?
I loved Ralph. I didn't care about California. And we have 4 children and 10 grandchildren.
Where are your children living?
My daughter is up near Boston. We have one son in Stanford, the oldest. One son is in Simsbury, Connecticut, and one son is in Burlington, Connecticut, because our new plant that they moved into about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, they're only about half an hour from there now.
we're in
Because our 4
South
children,
Windsor.
all our
South Windsor,
our
okay.
3 sons are in the business,
Mm-hmm.
so they're a little closer to the business now.
And how about, did you have any siblings?
I had a sister, my mother had a sister when I was 19, had a baby. So I have a young sister that's still in California.
And your
That's-
brother.
And my brother passed away young, he was out there too. And that's the reason we moved out there. My mother had a sister there and relatives, and we wanted to go out there. But Stanford was really my home from always. And I still love it. So do you, Lester.
Yeah, I was born here and I'm
Right.
staying here.
That's right.
Right.
Well, I'm only here 54 years, so, you know,
You're a newcomer,
right.
Well, that's a long time too, 54 years.
that's right.
Well, when you think in terms of Grand Central markets and so on, you know, we're going back to finance before and so on, you know, you think of all the different supermarkets that used to populate Stamford.
True.
Well, things that Gloria is going to be part of this interview, so we can ask you about, you also walked to Rogers School?
I walked to Rogers School.
From what grades?
Fourth grade and fifth grade, sixth grade. And then from there we went to Burdick, and we walked to Burdick.
Was Lafayette Street the dividing line? I mean, I don't understand why you didn't continue at Rogers, because it did go to the ninth grade.
I don't know. They sent us
That's
to
where they
Burdick.
had to
They
go.
broke it up. That's the way it was assigned.
Because I lived just a few blocks east, and I went to Rogers right through the ninth grade.
Oh, yeah, no, I didn't. They sent us to
See, I went from Rogers right to high school.
Harriet went to Rogers too.
Yeah. Do you have any particular fond memories of Rogers School? Is there any teachers there that you found made an impression on you, either good or bad?
They were all wonderful because coming from New York, my language was a little different. And they were very patient the way I spoke. Some of the children would make fun of it. But I'm trying to think of the teachers, the English teacher. Mrs. Wilbur I had in Burdick. She was a biology teacher. And
He wanted you to touch the snake.
yeah, I wouldn't. But anyway, the English, do you remember the English teacher at Rogers? I'm trying to think.
Was it Miss Gallagher?
And an art teacher we had. They were all wonderful.
Mhm.
They were just so good to all of us. We never had a problem.
Did you find any anti-Semitism when you were going to school?
Not really, because as you know, Lester, we're still friends with all those girls that are not Jewish. In fact, at lunchtime, if we didn't go home, I used to go with the girls to St. Mary's Church,
Mm-hmm.
because they would say a prayer, and I
Yeah.
would go with them. It just worked out very nicely until this day. Those that do live in Stamford, we see each other, and it was a wonderful relationship.
I think it's up to the individual, because
That's true, Lester.
people ask me, and I have the same thoughts as you,
Right.
that the incidents were few and very far between. And other people would say it was terrible.
No, I remember the wrestler, what's his name, Altamara?
Tony Altamaro.
He was wonderful.
Yeah.
If he saw me walking, he'd say, Gloria, come on, I'll give you a ride home. He had a car.
Yeah,
He was a rough kind of a person,
Mhm.
but very sweet.
yeah. He was a lifeguard at West Beach for many years.
And
He used to go there to oogle the girls, right?
That's, no, our mothers used to play mahjong at West Beach. We never went to camp.
Oh,
Never went to camp, so all the friends of the mothers would go to West Beach, and the mothers would play mahjong, and we would play with all the boys and the girls. We were all together.
yeah, well, West Beach was where you went.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you wanted to know a little bit about my personal life.
Go ahead, go ahead.
I was married when I was 23 years old, and I had my son when I was 25, and my daughter at 28, and I have 4 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren.
You were married to Benson Levine.
Yes, my first marriage. And he died in an unfortunate accident. And I remarried Leo Great, a man from Brooklyn. And I think I had that marriage for over 50 years. And he died when he was 89 years old. And from that marriage, I think everybody knows my son, Michael Gray, Pyramid. That's my son. And my daughter, I had my daughter for 59 years, and she died of cancer. But I have, from her, I have 2 wonderful granddaughters and great-grandchildren.
Do any of them live in Stamford or?
No,
They live in Amsterdam.
yeah, my son lives in Norwalk, and my granddaughters live in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, and they come to visit me at least once or twice a year.
And when's the last time you visited them?
Oh, that's a long time ago. I visited them for about 18 or 19 years, and after that my husband could not go. So they came here. My daughter came 2 and 3 times a year, very devoted. But it's just one of those things. But anyway, from them I really have enjoyed my grandchildren, and especially my son.
How are we doing?
We're doing fine, and your children?
Oh, well, 3 of our sons are in the business. They're all in the business. And most of their children now are in college. In fact, one of my grandsons is visiting us tomorrow. He's at Valhalla Medical School.
New York State Medical School
Yeah.
in Val.
Valhalla.
Yeah,
And once a week, they're assigned to a teacher, to a doctor in this area, which he chose because we're here. And he's coming in Wednesday to assist a pediatrician on Summer Street. I'm not sure of who it is. And
We're gonna have our own doctor, if we live long.
Yeah.
we have a grandson that works in Manhattan, he's a consultant. We have a grandson who's attending college in Texas for entrepreneurship, his master's. We have 2 granddaughters at UConn, going into for psychology and counseling. We have 2 grandchildren up in Keene State, New Hampshire, just starting. And then we have 1 little one who's 14. And that's the way the world turns.
Yeah.
Yep.
well, we
Do you have
can,
anything else, Les?
yeah, I think now we can go to the reflections about, you have seen Stanford from when it was a community of maybe 30 or 40,000 people
That's
to today 110,000, and
That's
you've
right.
seen the downtown when it was all, you could walk down Atlantic Street or Pacific Street, you knew all the merchants, they knew you.
Absolutely.
Do you know when, excuse me, when there was a football game, there was only 1 high school, and if we won, we would make a live train, holding hands, go down into the town and dance in and out of all the stores. And there was never a problem, no one ever took
No.
anything. I mean, it was just, that was the kind of a town it was.
Huh.
There was a central bus station.
Yeah, but you didn't have Boyle Stadium yet.
No, Boyle
Yeah,
Stadium. Yes,
yes,
yeah,
exactly.
that's where we played football.
Right.
And
Boyle
we had,
Stadium.
and we had a pond in back of the high school that froze, and we used to ice skate.
Ice skate,
there.
yeah.
Stanford High School had the Boyle Stadium.
I thought they built it with WPA money.
Yeah, but when we went to high school, it was completed.
Oh, it was completed. Okay.
I think it was maybe a WPA project.
It was, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely was a WPA project.
I graduated Stanford High School 1935.
So now the question is, as you go downtown Stanford, if you do go downtown,
Yeah,
what's your impression? Do you like it? You don't like
I
it?
don't
Do you?
like it. Especially now with that Trump building,
Trump Park.
yeah, Trump Plaza.
You're not thinking of moving there?
It's more like New York City. Not quite as big.
I like Stanford the way it was,
Mhm.
but I don't care for it. But I'm only here 6 months of the year anyway,
And we're together 6 months.
in Delray Beach, Florida.
Mhm.
The thing is, if Stanford hadn't gone forward, we wouldn't have gone anywhere. It had to go forward.
I wouldn't say it wouldn't go anywhere. I was just saying this morning when we did an interview with Ernie,
Yeah,
that if we didn't go forward, we would have been another Bridgeport.
that's what I'm
That's
saying.
right.
That's
That's
right.
all the depressed
Yeah.
towns.
That's
We had-
true.
We had to go forward.
Yeah,
right.
but not the way we're going, I
Well,
think.
It is, it's a good town. Pitney Bowes, companies like Pitney Bowes, Yale in town, we had the big manufacturers here.
Yeah, that's right.
And Pitney Bowes is still here, and there's an article, I think in today's paper, about their concern about the development in that area of Stanford, concerned about the heavy traffic that it's gonna bring.
Yep.
Yeah.
Uh, but you know that Stamford traffic has not improved over your life.
No,
And I don't think it,
excuse me.
behind our house, owned by people by the name of Kelly. It extended from halfway up Quintard Terrace all the way around Main Street.
oh,
Do you remember when the forerunner of the Jewish Center, the Hebrew Institute, was?
Oh, sure, I used
Can
to
you
go
tell us
there.
about that? With this?
I used to go there.
What was it like? What was the building like?
It was, as I recall, a two-story building. And in fact, we had a different kind of classes there. And there were Jewish classes given there, and there was also social classes. And at that time, do you remember Dorothy Conspor?
Yeah, sure do, yeah.
She had a group of young girls, and we'd go there once a week, and she would be like the head mistress of it, and we had a great time there. But as far as taking lessons there, I didn't, no.
Was it built to be a Jewish center, or was it something before?
I guess it must have been, but they didn't think about it then,
Yeah,
but it was just a two-story building, not much to it, no. But that's all we knew,
yeah.
and we were satisfied.
Was there a gym facility there, do you remember?
No,
There was not, nothing like that.
not that I recall.
Where was that?
The Hebrew Institute.
That was
It
before.
was on Grey Rock Place, actually.
Well, I'm the oldest here.
Yeah.
now, at the Hebrew Institute, did people speak Yiddish or not much?
Some did and some, I never spoke Yiddish. My mother would speak Jewish to us, and we would answer her in English. And that's how she learned to speak English. But we understood everything she said.
I mean, there were no Yiddish classes or anything like that.
The Yiddish classes that we had private lessons at home by Mr. Weinstein. Joe Weinstein taught all of us at home, preparing my brothers for bar mitzvahs and me just to give me a class.
But there was a Hebrew school on the upper floor of the Jewish Center.
That's right, there
Principal
were
was Mr.
classes.
Totus.
There were
Yeah,
classes.
but Mr. Weinstein was a teacher there. I remember he was
Yeah,
one of my
right.
teachers.
And he taught me to drive,
Mr. Weinstein did?
yeah.
He was a one-armed man.
And that's what I was just
Yeah.
gonna say.
Yeah.
He wore a leather glove,
Yeah.
yeah.
And he married one of the other teachers, Miss Haberman.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So what do you think, Gloria, about Stanford, now that you're the newcomer?
I think it has developed nicely. There are companies. Summer Street is lovely with all the big, lovely buildings. They're all taken care of. And we have a lot of immigrants in Stanford. And they're very happy here. Everybody seems to respect and get along. And I think it's developing nicely. And I hope it stays that way.
The economy here is pretty good. We've got a lot of empty office space, but people seem to be doing well. I don't think we were hit as hard as other parts of the country.
Yeah, I think that's a good reflection on how Stanford, having UBS and the Royal Bank of Scotland and so on, they hired a lot of people.
Yeah.
And
That's right.
they have a lot of functions for all races in this town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's very nice for everybody.
All right, I
Any
think
other
that,
comments before I thank you very much for providing us for this oral history?
It's our
Really?
pleasure.
Yes.
It's been our pleasure, and I want to thank you for it, and also remind you that while we will archive it, we don't expect it to be very popular.
we don't care.
But for your family, it will be.
That's what I'm, that's
There's
what I was
always
just gonna say.
someone in the future that wants to find out,
Absolutely.
and that's what does it.
Yeah,
That's why we do it, but we don't know who that someone is.
Well, you
Yeah.
never know.
Thank you very much.
Can we
This is a family portrait.
yes,
Right.
the original.
This is Louis over here with his wife Esther. And this is the youngest member of the family, Raymond. And behind him is Dorothy,
And Jack's one.
Jack's wife, and Sal, my mother Anna and Samuel Lotstein, Harriet. This is Dorothy over here.
Let me see. Let me see.
That's hard to see.
Look, can I turn it? That's Dorothy, my brother Jack's wife.
And this is me. And this is Jack. And this is Irving. And his wife, Myrtle.
And their daughter, Martha.
Myrtle was married, Irving's wife, Myrtle, was
His first wife.
a Strauss. They had a clothing store on Atlantic Street, up across from the gas and electric.
But a few of my brothers remarried. But this is the original picture.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Okay.
This is a picture of Samuel and Anna.